بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Inshallah, today we'll be starting chapter number 10, which is in regards to the shoes or the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The chapter that Imam Tirmidhi has compiled by the name of Babu Ma Ja'a Fi Na'li Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That which is in regards to the Na'al of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Na'al in the Arabic language is used for anything that is worn with the intention to protect the feet. Anything that is used for the protection of the feet while walking, while commuting, any form of protection that is to be sought in wearing something to protect the feet. The word also is used in the Quran. It comes when the story of Musa alayhi salam is narrated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Musa alayhi salam saw the fire on top of the hill, and when he went to pursue it, when he arrived there, the first words that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Musa alayhi salam is, Inni ana rabbuka fakhla'na alayk. That I am your Lord, remove your shoes. And the same exact word is used, na'al. That something that Musa alayhi salam had worn on his feet for the protection when he was traveling. The muhaddithun and the shurrah hadith, the commentators of the hadith, they mentioned that the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, and in those days of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the traveling would take place with both. With khuffain, which is what we discussed last week, which is the leather socks, which was also used as a form of protection. And na'al is something that could be worn and could be worn with the khuffain, with the leather socks, and it can also be worn without the leather socks. So it's more of sandals, and leather socks were also used for commuting. In regards to the qualities and the characteristics of the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 3 words come in specific to describe the quality and the description and the characteristic of the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first word is mukhsara. Mukhsara actually means something that is thin in the middle of it. So a person who has a very thin waistline is also called by this name. So anything that has a thin middle. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sandals were thick by the heel and were thick in the front, but towards the middle it was kind of thin. That's the first description that comes in the hadith. Also, the second word that is used is mu'aqaba. That it can mean 2 things. Either that the back of it it came up higher than the rest of the sole. It came up a little higher, so it's secure when you're walking. But Allama Zarqani rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions that it doesn't mean that it was elevated, rather it was flat, just the way we have our sandals. It was flat, it wasn't elevated, but it had a small strap around the ankle to secure it. So that strap is what comes in the hadith as mu'aqaba. That it was a strap that used to be that was used to secure the sandal to the feet. And the third is malsana. The front was round like a tongue. Lisan is used for a tongue. So it was as if the front of the sandal looked like a tongue. That it was round. It wasn't pointy it wasn't too much pointy, but rather it was round like the tongue. Before we move on, I wanted to clarify that the strap that was on top was in addition to the strap that was on the bottom. And inshallah we're going to read in the hadith that there were 2 straps on the bottom and then an additional strap about which only certain commentators narrate that there was an additional strap on top to secure the sandal to the feet. وبالإسناد المتصل منا إلى الإمام الترمذي رحمه الله تعالى قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا أبو داود الطيالسي قال حدثنا همام عنه رضي الله عنه قال قلت لأنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه كيف كان نعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لهما قبالان. This narration is narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. He was asked that how was the sandal or the shoe of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He replied, it was one, each shoe had two straps. وبه قال حدثنا أبو كريب محمد بن علاء قال حدثنا وكيع عن سفيان عن خالد حذاق عن عبد الله بن حارث عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه قال كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبالان مثني شراكهما. The second narration is very similar to the first. This is from Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, in which he narrates that each shoe of the Blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had two straps. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's shoe, looking at the characteristics that we just studied, it was a little thin in the middle, and it was thick on the back and in the front. It was round, and it had a strap on top of the sandal to secure it. These two narrations are talking about the strap that was to insert the toes in. So each one of these narrations talk about there were two straps on the sandal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The difference between qibal and shirak, commentators talk about it in detail, that qibal means the string that is used to secure the toe. That is called qibal. That it is the two circles that we insert the toes in. So there were two of them. Some majority of the narrations, they indicate that it was between the big toe and the small toe, big toe and the toe next to it, and immediately the one after that. So the two middle toes were the ones that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would insert into those qibal, which were those circles that was used to secure the toe. And the shirak is referring to those strings and those straps which come from those two strings all the way to the back of the sandal. So whenever we see a sandal, even that is popular in our culture, in our tradition now, is that you will see one sandal that is to insert the toes in. And then there is another strap which comes to the back of the sandal to secure the rest of the foot. So there were two circles in front of the sandal, and there were two straps that came to the back of the sandal to secure the feet. So, just kind of getting a little description of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sandal, that it was oval in shape with a very thin middle portion, and the front was round, and it had three straps. These two that is mentioned in this narration, and the one that came in the introduction. So the two straps, there were two toes that were secured with two circles, and two straps from those circles came all the way to the back of the sandal and secured the feet. And then there was a sandal on top by the ankle area, which was to secure the foot in place, the ankle in place. So while walking, the bottom of the sandal does not come off the feet, but rather it stays secure. So this is the description of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sandal. وبه قال حدثنا أحمد بن منيع قال حدثنا أبو أحمد الزبيري قال حدثنا عيسى بن طهمان قال أخرج إلينا أنس بن مالك نعلين جروادين لهما قبالان فقال فحدثني ثابت بعد عن أنس رضي الله عنه أنهما كانتا نعلين النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Isa ibn Tahman mentions that Anas radiallahu anh, we went to visit Anas radiallahu anh, and Anas radiallahu anh showed us a pair of the shoes or the sandals which did not have any hair on them. Inshallah, we're going to discuss Jardawain in the next narration as well, that it did not have any hair on them. and it had two straps on that sandal, as we mentioned in the previous narration. And Thabit rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions after to Isa bin Tahman that this were the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the shoes of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sahaba ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they collected these things that they would consider a form of respect and love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just the way we would have different artifacts, we would have different collections of our elders. Similarly, the Sahaba ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they used to collect these as a form of barakah, and they used to keep it with them, that it used to remind them of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he walked in a house, and there was, in those days, there used to be water coolers that used to be suspended from the wall, from the ceiling. They used to be hanging from the ceiling. They used to be made out of leather. They were leather water bags. So it was hanging from the ceiling. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he opened the cap and he took a few sips out of that water container and he sealed it. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam moved on. But the Sahabiya who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam drinking out of this container, she immediately cut the top of that and took that water container and the tip of that water container and saved it. So whenever she would consume water, she would take it she would drink from that cap, because the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was touched by that same exact water cooler. So this is, a lot of times we hear things which might not be so suitable, but in reality, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left such an example. He left such examples in his life that a person is just to love him in the highest form and fashion. And any time when we see these extremes, it is out of love. But again, if you look at the way the Christians and the Jews were misguided, it was because they adopted the extremes. If you look at the Jews, they attempted to assassinate the prophets of Allah alayhim salam. That whenever a prophet were to descend after their prophet, they would try to assassinate him. As we know that even Isa alayhi salam was attempted to be assassinated. So this was one extreme. And the other extreme is what the Christians have adopted. That they took the Prophet of Allah, alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, and they gave him so much respect and so much love that they said that he cannot be an average human being. So he has to be the son of God. So these are the two extremes. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam always taught us a moderate path, which was the path in the middle, that put everyone in their perspective. Treat everyone according to their status. When a Nabi of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is in this world, he is a human. He was sent as a human, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that He sent a prophet from amongst you, meaning a human. So all those different things that we hear, that any person has elevated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from a status above a human status, as some other being other than a human, we know that those things is exactly what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, that do not do what the Christians and the Jews have done. So this is the beauty of Islam, to the extent that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was gifted a pair of clothes. A sahabiya, radiyallahu anha, she came and she told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, this is an expensive pair of clothes. I have sewed it myself, and I wanted to give it to you so you can wear it in those gatherings which you considered important. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he had a habit that he would not take anything which was sadaqah, but he would take anything which was hadiyah. And that was one of the ways to recognize the last Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took this hadiyah from the sahabiya, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam put it on. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left the home, and he was approached by a Sahabi. The Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, whenever they would narrate something which might not be in the best form of respect, they would always hide the name. They would never mention the name. So if a Sahabi was caught doing something wrong, or doing something against the respect of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would not mention the name. Because this is also an adab. That a person who, because it can lead to backbiting, it can also lead to a person's aqeedah being corrupt about the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in. So the Sahaba did not mention the name. Some narrations do have it, but in majority of the narrations, the name is not mentioned. So the Sahabi, he mentions that he was approached by one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asked, Ya Rasulullah, I want this pair of clothes. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was just gifted this exact pair. And immediately, he said, Inshallah, when I remove it, I'll give it to you. And at the end of the day, when he returned home, he changed out of those pair, and he sent that pair to that Sahabi. So immediately, the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they approached the Sahabi, they did not have any ill feelings towards one another. And the best form of getting rid of this ill feelings is to make sure that we have communication. And the second thing we mentioned was in our last session, which was to gift one another. So the two key ingredients in getting rid of this ill feelings towards one another is to have proper communication. So the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they went to the Sahabi and they said, you did something very wrong. You shouldn't have asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for the pair of clothes that he was gifted. Today was the day he was gifted, and you had asked him, now he gave it to you, now he would be deprived of wearing those exact clothes. But the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they had too much insight, to the extent that we would never ever imagine the reason why he asked. He said, I felt the same way when I was asking. But the reason why I asked is because when I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing this garment, and I saw how happy he was, that I wanted this exact pair of clothes to be my kafan. I wanted to take this clothes so that it can become my kafan. And the other Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they emphasized that when this Sahabi passed away, this was the exact kafan that he was shrouded in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His ways of fulfilling the desires of the ones that He loves. So this was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in used to have these specific things that they would collect as a form of respect and a form of love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وبه قال حدثنا إسحاق بن موسى الأنصاري قال حدثنا معن قال حدثنا مالك قال حدثنا سعيد بن أبي سعيد المقبري عن عبيد بن جريح أنه قال لابن عمر رضي الله عنه رأيتك تلبس النعال السبتية قال إني رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يلبس النعال التي ليس فيها شعر ويتوضأ فيها فأنا أحب أن ألبسها. عبيد بن جريج radiyallahu anh narrates, I asked Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anh that I have seen you wearing shoes without any hair on them. There wasn't any hair. Very similar to the description of the shoes as the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which came in the previous narration. He says, I see you wearing this. So Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anh replied, I had seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing similar types of sandals without any hair on them, and I would prefer, and he would also perform wudu in it, and I prefer to wear the same exact shoes which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam preferred to wear. As-sibtiyya is a type of leather which was tanned to such a degree that no hair is left on them. So there are two types of tanning, some which would be tanned with the hair, and some which would be tanned without the hair. So this was a specific type. So when it comes to the sandals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, majority of the descriptions, they mention that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sandals did not have any hair on them. And this is exactly what Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu is also narrating, that that I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing it, and I prefer to wear the same exact sandals which I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wore these sandals because that's what he preferred. Even though it was considered a form of luxury, but it was more cleaner. It was easier to keep clean. And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is being asked this question, why do you wear such sandals? Now, if we were to stop here and ponder a little bit, that the student of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is asking him, why do you wear sandals without hair on them? Why was that question raised? If we were to ponder a little bit, that why was this question raised? The reason why this question was raised is because sandals without hair on them was considered a form of luxury, even in that time. This was after Muslims have conquered so many different nations that there was no shortage of wealth. Even at that time, the student is asking the teacher, a tabi'i is asking the sahabi, that why are you adopting this type of luxury? So this is just to ponder over the luxury of just wearing shoes without hair. This is the luxury that Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is being questioned, that why are you adopting such a luxury? And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, this is because I'm following the sunnah. So he did not mention this to the student that he wanted to adopt this because there was nothing wrong in it. Because in reality, to adopt something which is not in any way makruh or haram, as a form of luxury is completely permissible. But he did not want to direct the attention of his student towards there, but rather he mentioned that it is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that should be the scale on which we begin to measure our comfort. That if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam adopted something, we're going to adopt it because he has adopted it, not because it is a form of luxury. So this is Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh teaching the tabi'i in regards to how to live a lifestyle and what type of personality and mentality. And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh was very, very exceptional when it came to following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Once he was traveling with a group of companions, and sometimes he would swerve his ride to the right side, and sometimes he would be to the left. And sometimes he would climb a mountain unnecessarily. And sometimes he would go on a specific path unnecessarily. So the Sahaba, his students who were with him, they begin to ask, Ya Ibn Umar, why are you swerving your ride? Why are you going to the left, to the right? He said, at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we would travel with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I recall that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ride went to the right side a little bit in this path. And sometimes I remember that his ride went to the left, and I would try to even follow the sunnah of which the horse or the camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam adopted, so that way I can even follow that sunnah. Maybe my ride might step into the same exact path and same exact area in which the ride of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stepped in. This is Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Once the companions, they were traveling, and he said, stop. And they stopped. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, he excused himself, and he went behind a tree. And he spent some time there. Then he returned, and they continued their journey. So the students never asked, he never mentioned anything, and they continued. Then a time came when Salah was about to be called. So when the Salah was called, Ibn Umar radiallahu anh went to lead without performing wudu. So the students reminded him, Ya Ibn Umar, maybe you forgot that you used the bathroom back there, so you might have to do wudu. So they were thinking that he might be forgetting. But he said, the bathroom break that I took back there was in reality, I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam use the bathroom in that same exact spot. And I will never ever dare to use the bathroom in that spot, but I wanted to just go and spend time in that same exact location in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent time in. This is Ibn Umar radiallahu anh. He was very, very exceptional when it came to adopting the sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وبه قال حدثنا إسحاق بن منصور قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق عن معمر عن ابن أبي ذئب عن صالح مولى تأمة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبالان. This narration is also from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, in which he mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sandals had, each of the two sandals had two straps. وبه قال حدثنا أحمد بن منيع قال حدثنا أبو أحمد قال حدثنا سفيان عن السدي قال حدثني من سمع عمر بن حريث يقول رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي في نعلين مخصوفتين. Amr ibn Hurayth radiallahu an mentions that I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam perform prayer with such sandals that had another sole, another piece of leather sewn onto them. Makhsufatain means that there was additional leather that was sewn onto it. It could be for two reasons. One was that because the abundance of traveling that they would do, that sometimes when the bottom leather would become thin, they would apply another layer of leather. And some is that it would actually rip, and it was done for repair purposes. Whether it was done just to make the sandal stronger, or it was done for repair purposes. It denotes that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam even had a patch on his sandals. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not use anything and get rid of using it without reaching its maximum benefit. And this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaching us that any time, even to the extent that some of the scholars, they mention that no one should throw out any pair of clothes without having a patch on it. Unless there is a patch on it, you should not throw it out. That means that we did not use it to its maximum benefit. Because we saw Umar radiallahu anh, that he had over 17 patches when he went to sign the peace treaty in Bayt al-Maqdis. So this is Umar radiallahu anh. But even if we cannot reach the level of Umar radiallahu anh, the least we can do is that if a person is thinking that clothes are getting old and there is any torn on there should be at least one patch before we completely get rid of that cloth. So this is one of the way to determine when an item reaches its maximum benefit. And this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam having patches even on his sandals. Obviously there's different types of leather that was sewn onto it. In this specific narration, it mentions that yusalli fi na'alayn, that he would pray in such sandals and such shoes. The key of praying in shoes is that, just for the sake of the argument of our shoes, the shoes in those times, because they were made out of leather and they were fairly thin compared to the rubber soles of today, so the foot had somewhat flexibility. So in sujood, you can press down on the toes, and the toes would actually bend because of the flexibility. Similarly, some of our shoes might have that, some of our shoes might not have that. So that flexibility should be there. One of the things that we need to remember is that the shoes must be tight. Like in those days also, the shoes would be tight enough that the foot would actually fit inside to such a degree that the leather is as if it's wrapped around the foot. So sometimes in our shoes, we're able to get a grip and secure the shoe without making it tight. So it needs to be tight that the fuqaha, they specifically mentioned that the foot fills the shoe. They mention a terminology that the foot, it fills the shoe, then it's okay to pray in it. But what is filling of the shoe is something that we need to determine, that are we wearing shoes that is actually wrapped around our foot or not. And one of the things that we need to remember all the time is that any time if we happen to wear our shoes to pray, we need to make sure that they're free from any filth. They are free from any filth. That if we're walking in a park, there could be some type of feces of an animal that was laying there and we might have stepped on it. So we have to make sure that the shoes itself are clean. To the extent that even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, once he was praying, and during his salah, Jibreel alayhi salam came and he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to remove his shoes. And some of the commentators indicate that the reason and the purpose why Jibreel alayhi salam asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to remove the shoes was because there was some type of filth on them. So this is one thing that we have to remember. وبه قال حدثنا إسحاق بن موسى الأنصاري قال حدثنا معن قال حدثنا مالك عن أبي الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يمشين أحدكم في نعل واحدة لينعلها جميعا أو ليحفيها جميعا. وبه قال حدثنا قتيبة عن مالك عن مالك بن أنس عن أبي الزناد نحوه. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned that none of you should walk with one shoe or one sandal. Either wear them both or remove them both. In some of our previous sessions, we talked about how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is guiding us in every single path. That whatever we do, even to the extent that we studied one of the sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that one should dust his shoes before wearing them, just so that there's nothing that, harmful inside of the shoe before, so it can harm the person. Similarly, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is mentioning in another etiquette that either you wear both shoes or you remove both shoes. If we have to walk somewhere while only having one shoe, then we should remove the second one as well until we're able to wear both. So this is an etiquette that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioning. Many times, it might seem like, what is the harm in wearing one shoe? Commentators have actually mentioned over 11 reasons as to why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could mention that. But if you were to just ponder over that, why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mention this fine detail about not wearing one shoe? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always instructed the Muslims to be very mature. And it is a sign of immaturity that a person is walking around with one shoe. It is a sign of immaturity. Similarly, like if a person he walks into an office place with only one sleeve in his jacket and the other one is hanging, immediately we'll say, okay, there's something wrong. It's not part of the manners and the etiquette of entering a workplace in this fashion. Similarly, it is against the maturity and the manners of a Muslim that a person can walk with one shoe. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that if you cannot wear the second one, do not even wear the first one. Otherwise, wear them both. And also, some say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the title Ummatun Wasata, a very moderate nation. That this is kuntum khayra ummatun ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'rufi wa tanhauna 'anil munkar. That we are that nation that has moderation. And we are khayra ummah, that we're the best of all the nations. We're perfected in that fashion. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to train us and give us etiquettes to such a degree that this type of moderation is not even accepted. We talked about moderation in regards to loving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped us from behaving like those that were in the past. That there are some who used to kill the prophets, and there are some who used to consider the prophets as sons. But we're a moderate nation. We need to be moderate. We know that we have to love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it has its limits. So similarly, this is a sign of this is a sign that this person has absence of moderation. That he's wearing one sandal and he's not wearing the other sandal. And some commentators actually mention that it is being unthankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is a very fine way of saying that, of mentioning that we're not thankful enough if we only wear one shoe. If, for example, if we were to buy our children all the utensils that he needs for school, but he doesn't take it. He will take the pencil, but he will not take the sharpener. He will take the pencil, but he will not take the eraser. So now, immediately the teacher is going to say, how come you didn't bring this? And immediately, he or she will try to attempt to contact the parents because this person, this child, is not bringing this. But when we ask the child, why didn't you bring it? It is as if he is affecting our credibility. Because when he didn't take it to school, the teacher tried to contact the parent because there is something missing here. Similarly, if the child comes to school 100% prepared, the credit goes to the parent. Similarly, when we show ourselves 100% prepared, then it is a credit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is as if we're thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us everything that we needed. And we're not walking around with half-dressed. We're not walking around with incomplete preparation. But rather, we're 100% complete. So this is, it's a very fine line. It's very difficult to understand. I had to read it multiple times before I can absorb it as well, that how fine this is. That by us not being completely prepared when presenting ourselves to the public, it's as if we're unthankful to our Creator. Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with the ability to be dressed in both shoes, when we choose to dress with one, then it is as if we're being unthankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of the commentators, they mentioned this in the books of etiquette, and they mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this etiquette for the sole purpose of teaching us not to walk in a fashion that might be hazardous to ourselves. Because we know then that a person adopts the method of na'al. The only reason why he wears shoes is to protect his feet. Because that is the area that is touched on the ground most of the time. So that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us to make sure that we wear both shoes. So it is a form of safety. وبه قال حدثنا إسحاق بن موسى قال حدثنا معن قال حدثنا مالك عن أبي الزبير عن جابر أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يأكل يعني الرجل بشماله أو يمشي في نعل واحدة. Jabir radiallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam prohibited eating with the left hand or wearing only one shoe. We talked in detail about using the right hand for everything that is considered clean and pure, and using the left hand for anything that is considered impure or something that is disliked by Sharia. And to the extent that a narration comes in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the gathering with a few companions, a person came and began to consume food with his left hand. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, eat with your right hand. And this person said, I cannot. And the purpose of why he said he could not is because he felt ashamed, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling him to eat with a different hand than what he was initially eating with. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, lastata, that may you not be able to eat. And after that day, they said, until the day this person passed away, he never ever was he able to lift his right hand to his mouth. So throughout the rest of his life, he had to eat with his left hand. So this is, when we're in the company of the pious, and we want to make sure that anything that we learn from them, we need to respect it, because it's actually the knowledge that is coming through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وبه قال حدثنا قتيبة قال حدثنا إسحاق بن موسى قال حدثنا معن قال حدثنا مالك عن أبي الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا انتعل أحدكم فليبدأ باليمين وإذا نزع فليبدأ بالشمال فلتكن اليمين أولهما تنعل وآخرهما تنزع. Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه mentions that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم mentioned, when any of you put on his shoes or sandals, he should begin with the right, and when he removes them, he should begin with the left. So the right should be the first that is worn and the last which is removed. The next narration is also in regards to this. وبه قال حدثنا أبو موسى قال حدثنا محمد بن مثنى قال حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال حدثنا شعبة قال حدثنا أشعث وهو ابن أبي الشعثاء عن أبيه عن مسروق عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحب التيمم ما استطاع في ترجله وتنعله وطهوره. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to love beginning everything with the right side as much as possible. While even combing the hair, he would start from the right. While putting on his shoes, he would start from the right. While performing wudu, he would start from the right. Anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do, he would always begin with the right. And this is something that we discussed in one of the past narrations, one of the past sessions in detail about beginning with the right. The last narration in this chapter is وَبِهِ قَالَ حَدَّثَنَا مُحْمَدْ بْن مرزوق أبو عبد الله قال حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن قيس أبو معاوية قال حدثنا هشام عن محمد عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبالان وأبي بكر وعمر وأول من قعد قعدا واحدا عثمان رضي الله عنه. That Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه narrates that the shoes of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم had two straps. In the same manner, the shoes and the sandals of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu also had two straps, and the first one to wear shoes and sandals with one strap was Uthman radiallahu anhu. And this is Uthman radiallahu anhu going against something that was done in the past. And inshallah, when we get time, in one of the other sessions, we will talk about the different types of sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how some companions choose to differentiate between what is sunnah that is part of Sharia and the sunnah that was done as a habit of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there is a very clear line between the two. And we're not misunderstanding and interpreting one into another. And some of the companions took this opportunity to make sure that all the other companions and all the tabi'een and the tabi'een are educated about the different forms of sunnah, and this is the reason why they choose to do something different than what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon everything that was said, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to adopt these sunnahs in our life. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير